right, here we go. Back in on a Thursday, everybody. Man, it's so good to be back. Every time we end an episode of the week, it feels like the time just plods and drags along till we get to be back with you all. But it's Thursday night, and we're super pumped to be back for another week of the Gem City Sports Podcast, brought to you by our friends at Rebich Investments. They keep financial guidance simple. If you want more info, and you should want more info because they're great at what they do, go ahead and give them a call at 814-734-3433, or you can simply go to the website, www.rebichinvestments.com. Again, www.rebichinvestments.com. Busy show tonight. We're talking high school basketball and Prep-McDowell round number 2. I think, and I'm not 100% sure, but last I checked, I think they ended their first game. But I can't be completely sure on that. So we're going to talk about round number 2 and if we think it's going to go even further than the 3 overtimes it took back in round 1 a short while back. Other high school basketball talk as well. We're talking Region 5 of the boys and how Erie High girls have really come on strong as they're taking on McDowell tonight in a Class 6A matchup. Plus some other talk as well. We'll hit some NFL really late in the show and move that more so to Friday. Also touch on a little bit the Stan Butler firing with the Erie Otters and how the Otters now go from here. But we start with our good friend Jonathan Williams, who is T-minus 7 days from traveling back down south, my friend. It looks like everything's packed up.
Yeah, no, I got started. I actually didn't procrastinate for once. So I got started a little bit early, about a week ago, getting some things together and trying to get everything organized around here. So all there's really left to do is load up the car. So I feel good.
Yeah, load up the car and then make the drive, right? I mean, that's half the battle. I'll tell you what, though, I'm sure for you it's going to feel good getting a chance to go back home. For those of you who don't know, Jonathan accepting a professional football contract with the team in South Carolina, the South Carolina Ravens, by the way. We won't hold that against you for all the Steeler fans in attendance of this podcast tonight. He's got one more week with us. So you're here through what? Thursday, maybe we get you for one last show?
Thursday, maybe Friday morning.
Okay. All right. So we've got him at least for one more. And he'll be part of our Super Bowl episode, too, depending on what all happens. Ignore the background noise. I think my son's down here. He's also trying to take my spot as the host. I'm sure you saw that post a little bit earlier in the day. All right. Jonathan and Isaac are in studio, and so is Tom Koval, who is not moving. That's why you see the great Kobe Bryant jersey, the coach. I don't know if that's Coach K or Kentucky or something like that in the background. It seems like, Tom, you add a new photograph every time you're on the podcast with us.
No, that's the same ones, right? I haven't made a change at all. Maybe I'm just a different angle.
I don't know. It looks like you've moved more from like 1 or 2 to 3 or 4 or 5. But hey, we're all for it. We all love the background. And so it's good to have him back on. Tom, of course, former District 10 championship winning coach with the Erie High Royals and still very much involved in the local basketball scene. So let's kick this off. And I think we'd be remiss if we started anywhere besides Prep-McDowell. I joked at the top of the show that I wasn't sure if they were still playing their first game, but Lord, we were on this show with the three of us the last time these two teams played, and we said we thought we would have a final score for you by the time the episode ended, and we didn't. And the episode ended almost at 9:15, 9:30. That game back on January 8th, McDowell won at 82-76. So let's start with the preview of this one, because I think, Tom, even though these two teams are in different classifications, and we of course know that's been the case for a while now, let's break down the last game, and what we saw on film and some of the things that may be a key in this game tomorrow night. The one thing that I thought was really intriguing when you looked at the stat sheet from this game is that both teams did really well in the paint. And we talked about that sometimes these two teams tend to have contrasting styles, right? Prep's a squad that can really run the floor, shoot from distance with Nanda Meraki. But it was Michael Thompson, Max Wallace, and on the other side, Stephon Porter, who dominated in this game. Is that something you see happening this time around? What adjustments do you think get made tomorrow night when they face off in round 2?
With rivalries like this, you just never know who's going to step up. It could be a completely different game this time around. I remember watching the film of the game. I thought Prep really had control of the game going into the third quarter. I thought it was going to be done. McDowell made a run, came back at the very end. I thought Prep really fell to the stress of a close rivalry game like that. I think they folded a little bit towards the end, which allowed it to get to overtime, and McDowell got that win. I think they'll be ready this time, but I don't know. Inside, outside, I still think Prep has a little bit more of an advantage on the inside. I'd really like to see them get that ball inside to Thompson and Wallace and see what they can do. I think that could be the game changer for this one.
What surprised me the most in that game, and you mentioned Prep's advantage on the inside, and I agree with you. I think both those guys can single-handedly eliminate Stephon Porter, although traditionally, Baby Porter in these rivalry games, even when he played you guys when you were the coach, he tended to play pretty well, aggressively on the block. But for me, when I looked at the game last time, and you talked about home court advantage, I'm sure down the stretch really worked for McDowell. Those games are always sold out. They're always loud. Same with McDowell, Erie, Prep Erie. It's always a great environment. But I think Prep did a really good job of weathering the storm early on. McDowell really started out with an aggressive attack. Camden Kramer, Quentin Orlando, they were both shooting the ball well. And it seemed like Prep took over. But what I really liked in that first game, and what I've liked from McDowell all year, is Kevin O'Connor's made a lot of adjustments. And there's a reason that this McDowell team is sitting at 16-2 on the season and scoring at the clip that they're scoring at. And so when I look at this matchup, Tom, and you mentioned the inside play for Prep and how they can get better. My question for McDowell is that there's got to be a thinking in Kevin O'Connor's mind, as I'm sure it is for you when you get to this round 2 in region play, that there's still another level that the Trojans can get to. Because I don't know if 82 points is going to win the game this time if it goes to overtime. Is there something you think that McDowell maybe has to change a little bit if they want to prove that they are better than Prep and it doesn't take a 3 overtime game to get it done?
I think really on the defensive end, Kevin's going to want it to be a lower scoring game. I think that benefits him. Those boys, they play defense. They play good team defense. So I think if they can keep the score down, that definitely goes in McDowell's favor. So I can look at them, maybe even changing the defense up a little bit to change tempo, throwing some zone in there a little bit with their man. Maybe we'll see a little bit of that to give them advantage on the defensive end.
Coach, what do you think they have to do specifically, or what would you potentially do to maybe stop a Spencer Can and Nando from really affecting the game as much as they did last time around? I mean, watching highlights, especially early in that game, it seemed like it was the two of them kind of attacking downhill and getting to the rim pretty easily early on. What do you think what would you do to kind of start to slow those two guys down?
Well, two different guards there, right? I know Nando didn't play against Erie. I think he had an ankle sprain, so hopefully he's 100% coming into this one. You want to keep him from penetrating, right? Especially with Spencer on the outside. If you have to help off of Spencer and they pass the ball to him, he's making that 3-point, right? He's deadly out there. So if you can contain Nando, keep him on the perimeter a little bit, I think you got an advantage. That's something that Erie did a really good job of, is keeping Prep on the perimeter and shooting threes. And if those aren't falling, as you can see, Erie came up with the W in that one.
It's so intriguing because, Tom, and we're going to get to Erie in a second on the boys and girls side and the way the Royals have been performing well. And I think it just goes to show that second half of the season matters so much. That now we're getting into the part where you're getting game 2 of these two rivalries. But when I looked at game 1 between McDowell Prep and you look at how close the score was, the one thing that I thought with both of these teams is they're going to do a really good job of challenging each other's depth. And I want to make a comment that, I think there have been some people, maybe not a lot, but some people that I've talked to that have said, well, because they're in 4A and because they're in 6A, this rivalry doesn't mean as much because it doesn't have a lot of playoff implications and whatnot. But this sort of a game, as it showed back on January the 8th, is a depth and bench tester game. And I think what we've seen from both of these teams, more so Prep, because I think they played more close games than McDowell has, is you've seen Jeremy Lynch have to go to his bench a little bit more. Kevin O'Connor, I'm sure, has also preached that to his team, that you can't just win with 5 or 6. And when you get to a D10 championship game, that might be what you have to do. But I think, Tom, if you could just touch on this, just from your coaching experience, I think these rivalry games, just as much as they are a test for you, even out of class, I think they are a test of your bench. And for me, I'm interested to see how in round 2 Prep-McDowell do that again.
Well, let's start with this. Whoever those fools are that are saying that this rivalry doesn't matter because they're in different classifications, they're crazy.
It's not many, but it's a couple.
right? I know the players, it means the world to them. And we've all
Yeah.
seen the fans and right, the student sections, right? This doesn't matter what classification you're in. So first and foremost, it's going to be a battle. And because of that, there's just a layer of excitement. There's a part of the players playing so much harder in these games because it becomes physical, it becomes scrappy, and you get tired. So you have to go to your bench, right? You want your guys out there. So it really tests your whole team. And as they say, the best team wins, right? That we're talking about a holistic approach here. I know Kevin says that this is one of the best undersized teams that he has had. And I know McDowell, or I know Prep also is very deep with lots of talent. So it's going to be a battle to see who can come off the bench and play really well for them, because they're going to need every player on that team.
It's funny, Jonathan, because Tom makes an interesting point. We started this conversation with talking about the contrasting styles based on size, and yet McDowell is a small, undersized team that attacks the rim, and they're really good at pulling down rebounds. And then you see Cathedral Prep, and you look at Michael Thompson, Max Wallace, and the Lakes, and you think to yourself, well, they're just going to box you out, attack inside the paint, and win. But yet those two guys can run the floor. I mean, Wallace and Thompson are two of the more athletic forwards, if you want to call them that I've really ever seen in District 10. So I think both of these coaches have done a really good job, despite their makeup of the roster, at being able to not sway one way or the teeter-totter. They've done a really good job of being able to work both high and low, and I think that's what makes this matchup a second time around so intriguing.
I mean, yeah, like Tom said, a lot of it comes down to just the players playing hard. These guys scrap on both ends of the floor, so it doesn't matter if you're undersized fighting for a rebound or going up against a larger opponent. Both of these teams are scrappy. Both of these teams aren't willing to give an inch. Both of these teams are going to play hard, especially when they're playing against each other. So everything is going to be 50-50. And you can kind of throw out the sizes and the different heights and everything out the window, because it doesn't really matter in a game like this. Everybody is going all out for every loose ball. Everybody's playing hard. Everybody's scrapping and fighting and trying to gain any advantages they can. And that's a testament to these two coaches for instilling that into both of these teams and instilling that willingness to just go out there and play hard regardless of anything.
And the ironic part, if we're talking about that, okay, the rivalry doesn't mean as much, and I promise you it's a really slim number of people who don't tend to watch a lot of high school sports that have told me that. But, for Cathedral Prep, they've got 16 other teams in 4A that they may have to compete against. So depth is going to be tested. So you need a game like this to be able to test it. And then for McDowell, and this is where a good transition point is, you could make an argument earlier in the season, it looked like the D10 6A championship game would be a cakewalk. Now I'm not so sure. Tom, let's talk about your former squad in the Erie Royals. In my opinion, the two most impressive wins of last week in boys basketball were Erie High, beating Cathedral Prep, albeit without Meraki, and I understand that that's a big part of it, but strong on the offensive end. They score 65 points and they beat the Ramblers. Then they go to Girard in the region-leading Yellow Jackets and probably played, at least in January, in my opinion, their best game of the season. They won that by double digits. It wasn't really competitive. What is Erie doing to turn a corner? Because it seemed like Coach Pulliam now has a different squad as we end the month of January and get ready for the stretch run here.
Well, I think they're starting to find themselves, right? They're getting comfortable probably with Coach Pulliam's coaching style. They've always had the athleticism, and you can see it coming around on defense. I really wasn't surprised with the Girard outcome. Their athleticism just kind of smothered some pieces of Girard with that point. But you're seeing Julius Jeffries, playing really well, attacking the rim, slashing, getting offensive rebounds. The same thing with Charlie Williams and Joe Jones, right? Those guys are out there and just playing, right? They're getting the ball, they're attacking, they're slashing, they're making plays on the defensive end, which is turning into offense for them, which is fun to see.
When you talk about Coach Pulliam's style, and a lot of people who are watching this podcast probably have seen him coach or have been around him because we know the strong Erie figure that he has been in coaching in the past. What style does he bring that was different from what you had with your coaching style that these players have had to learn? I mean, I know you all preach similar, fundamentals and things, but has there been that learning curve, and has there been a strategy change that this team has had to learn for those who maybe aren't familiar with Coach Pulliam's style?
Well, I'm sure, Shannon's been running the Tornado, the 1-3-1 pressure in the half court and three-quarter court for a long time, and that's something that I didn't do. We did a lot of man-to-man pressure. The intensity is the same, but you got to be in different positions. You got to rotate differently. So just getting used to that is something that those kids had to become accustomed to, and probably had to get rid of some frustrations where, man, I was used to this for so many years and now it's changing, and they had some frustration points there. But they've been playing well lately, and that's what matters at the end of the season.
How much does playing that kind of like full court pressure, that 1-3-1, how much does that allow you to use your athleticism to your advantage?
You're getting into gaps when you're playing full court. You're putting pressure on guards to do things that they normally don't, right? The biggest point of that is to change the tempo of the game. So you're going to make players play faster, right? We're passing the ball up to guys that normally don't get the ball in those positions, right? So now they're uncomfortable, and that's the point, right? You're making them rush shots, maybe not get set in their offense because you're changing the tempo as well. So you're making them play a different style that they're probably not used to. So that's a big advantage from the pressing standpoint.
What has to work for a 1-3-1 to work? I feel like we could talk about a whole episode about how this specific style works, because there's a lot that goes into it, right? We've seen it in college. We see it more so in college now. There's a part of Gannon that does this, maybe in a hybrid set. There are other plenty of teams that like to play this full court press. But a 1-3-1 is so neat to me because you see it in basketball, you see it in hockey. To an extent with more players, there's, football does it too. When you talk about, zone coverage and things of that nature with the two high safeties, what has to go into a 1-3-1 to make it work? And do you think Erie's at a point now, you said they've gotten better at it. What have you seen that they've been allowed to do or been able to do more so that has made that 1-3-1 work?
Well, number one, if you run a 1-3-1, you're forcing the offense with that odd front to put two guards up there, right? So now you have two guards handling the ball, and there's not a lot of high school teams that have two guards that can handle the ball, right, and make the proper plays. So that's a different look, right? You also have the fact that most teams in practice are running their man-to-man offense versus their man-to-man defense. So they're not practicing against something like that night in and night out. So it's something new, right? So they're not as comfortable. And there's also different ways to run it. Dave Nyland ran this at Barron sometimes, and it was more of a Michigan style one where they're just trying to slow the ball down and make them pass over the top. And you can also trap really hard out of it up top with quick traps, and you speed it up. So there's a lot of different styles that you can do with it, and it's really hard to replicate that in your practice if you don't run it yourself. Your players aren't used to running it the right way, so you can never get a great look and prepare for it.
It's funny you mentioned having to have two guards who can handle the basketball, because I think that alludes and segues really well into this game preview here, because I think as big as Prep-McDowell is, I think Meadville Erie tomorrow night's a statement game for both of these teams. The Bulldogs have won 2 straight after a big win against Fairview, so both these teams are coming off wins against Region 6 teams that are at or near the top of that region. Those are big wins. Meadville also beat Brookville back on Wednesday, so they're, like we said, riding 2-game win streaks. Jack Bircher, Lucas Luteran, they both shot really well when Meadville beat Erie back on January 7th, but it's, again, similar lines as McDowell Prep, is now you have a chance to make adjustments. When you look at the key for this game, and I'll take it from you from the Erie perspective, because I think we know from Meadville, if they shoot the ball well, they have a good chance to win any game. What do you think needs to be different this time around for the Royals to get it done, and what would be ultimately a huge region win, yes, but also a huge win at home to end the month of January?
I think one big thing for Erie in that game is they need to shoot better than they did last time that they played against them. Scoring allows you to set up your defense a lot easier. Meadville gets the ball with their guards and they go. And if you can slow it down and allow your defense to get set against them, it's important to get the ball into the rim, right, to allow that. So I think if they score a little bit better, that'll help. And not an easy task, but trying to keep the ball out of their hands and make the other 3 players on the floor beat you is kind of what you want to force.
For me, just a little bit, like I'm actively watching the film from their last game right this second, and just off the first 30 seconds of the film, you can't turn the ball over as much as you did last time. They gave the ball away a lot in that game. Even in this first little clip that I'm watching, I've seen 3 different times where they passed the ball straight to Meadville, and it led to easy runouts, and it led to fast break points, and it led to layups. So that's one of those things where you can't afford to go down early by turning the ball over and essentially giving Meadville points. If you can protect the basketball, you have a lot better of a chance of staying in this game and having it be close down the stretch.
I think in a way, too, for Erie, and I think you could say the same with McDowell against Cathedral Prep because of the athleticism, but for Erie, I think Meadville tomorrow night's a good test for what some of the things you may see against McDowell is. And you talked about, Tom, the 1-3-1 and how effective it can be. For me, and maybe I'm early in saying this, but I look at Erie McDowell down the road when they play in the District 10 championship, and I think to myself, if Erie wins the game in the back half of the court, if they can be the aggressor, force turnovers, I think they have a good shot to potentially knock off McDowell. So question for me tomorrow night for the Royals is going to be simple. Can you force Meadville to turn the ball over in their own end of the floor, and how quickly and how aggressively do you force Meadville to try to get the ball over half court within 6 to 7 seconds? So that's something that I'm looking at tomorrow night because I think, Tom, to your point, if that tornado trap is successful against Meadville and we see Erie pull that out tomorrow night, given the fact that Bertrand and Lutheran are as good as advertised and as they've been, you got to feel like that gives you more confidence when you play McDowell the second and third time around, given that the Trojans are that small, aggressive team that also likes to try to run the floor.
You know, when you're dealing with 16 and 17-year-old kids, there's nothing more confidence building than a W, right? And I think it doesn't matter how well they play sometimes. If you can grind out a win, it just feels good for the team. It feels good as a coach, right? Everything's more positive in practice, right? There's nothing more important to me in all my years is winning at the end of the season to go into the playoffs, because you don't want to be second guessing. You don't want to have any turmoil on the team because you lost this game and this is the reason, right? You want to win. So grinding out these W's at the end is going to be really important as all of our teams in the district roll into the playoffs.
Let's flip the script and go to the girls' side, gents, for a minute, because we tend to focus in on singular teams on the girls' side, and we talked last week about Fairview Harbor Creek and how important that game was for them. Fairview now has since gone on not just to beat Harbor Creek, but they beat General McLean, and I think that conversation now in Region 6 is all the more intriguing because now Fairview's got the clear path to a region championship with only facing Harbor Creek one more time. But we talked about the Erie boys, and now all of a sudden the Erie girls, I think, are quietly, maybe not for you, Tom, because you see them more often than we do, but quietly putting together one of the more remarkable defensive seasons that we have seen. And I think we saw last year, and even in years that I covered the team when they were really, really at their best, they were hard to score against, period, but especially in the paint. And now what we're seeing with Erie, by the way, they're playing McDowell tonight. We'll see if we can get some score updates as we roll through the show. This defense for the Royals is something to behold, Tom. And I think we're starting to see a team now that has that identity even more so than we've seen in previous years.
Yeah, it starts with Drea.
Yeah.
And I watched her all through the summer. She was playing on the travel circuit, and my daughter was playing in the same program, just a few grade levels underneath her. So I got to see her a lot. And boy, could she pressure the ball. Boy, could she dive on the floor and set the tone. And when you have your best player on the team doing that, everybody does it, right? There's nothing better than a leader who is your hardest worker out there on the floor. It just becomes contagious. And when they're playing great defense, they're very hard to score against.
Drea and Aubrey, for years now, really for 3, this is really the third year where they have been a big part of the focal point of the team. I have struggled to see a brother or sister connection in District 10 that's as on point as the two of them are. And it's so fascinating to me because they play such in different ways in the way that their play style is and where they like to attack on the floor. You've seen them now consistently be able to play off of each other and whatnot. That chemistry, for me, at least as I see it, has been pretty tremendous. What allows them to be so in sync on the floor that has allowed them to have this much success this season, in which both players now are sitting potentially in double figures? We'll ask Tom about that question in a second. He just dropped off here. But Jonathan, those two in particular, for years, Erie, I think, has been looking for that group of leadership, and now they have it, and those two as seniors are really leading the way, not just offensively, but defensively as well.
And I mean, it helps when you quite literally grow up with someone. Like, there's so much chemistry there that is developed over time of just playing with each other, and just being able to kind of know what each other are going to do before they do it. So when you see it on the court, and sometimes there might be a pass or something that's made, or a backdoor cut that's made, or something where it's like, how did she know she was going to be there? But it just all kind of comes down to the chemistry of playing together. And when you have two players like that can play off of each other and elevate everyone around them, it makes everyone better. It makes everybody else kind of fall in line, and everyone is kind of following those two's lead.
Tommy, we're just talking about Drea and Aubrey Nevins and the sisterly connection. Just from what you've seen, their ability to be in sync, what has allowed them to be so dynamic, even stepping up a level from previous years now, both as seniors?
Well, they're twinning. They're twinning, baby, right? I mean, besides the DNA, they've been playing together their whole lives. It's a really unique situation that Dre is a slasher and a point guard, and you got Aubrey spotting up and she can hit the outside shots, right? It's such a cool thing of how they work together, and watching them throughout the summer, Keith Wallace Skills Academy, Keith, my former point guard who's training them, and I see them working hard all the time, right? That consistency of working out together, boy, is that paying dividends right now.
Right now in the fourth quarter, as I'm watching some of the stream, 29-25, Erie leads over McDowell with about 4 minutes left to go in the fourth there. So if the Royals can win that game, they'd be in a good position to potentially sweep McDowell. And again, there's still plenty of season left to go, but you look at this Erie-McDowell 6A matchup now, and you think to yourself, well, there's a good opportunity for the Royals to potentially take District 10. They just beat Warren on Monday by 20 points. And Warren has historically, maybe not this year, but they have been a team that's been a thorn in 5 and 6A team side. So we'll see. Royals playing really, really well. And as we roll through the season, one of the things you will see is consistency is, again, the key for Erie, because they just continue to roll and play the way that they know how. And that's feeding off of each other with Drea and Aubrey Nevins. In a second, we're going to get to some Tom's teams to look out for and teams that he's been really impressed with. Of course, though, want to mention Rebich Investments are a proud sponsor of this show, and we're more than happy to be partnered with them. They are keeping financial guidance simple. If you want more info, head to their website, www.rebichinvestments.com, or just call their number at 814-734-3433. Again, 814-734-3433. Tom Koval, let's start on the boys' side. Team that we haven't really mentioned tonight or other nights that have been playing really well. You've got a lot to choose from. If you want to talk in Region 5 or 6, go for it. But what's that one team that we really haven't talked about much that you think is a squad that in the last 2 weeks is going to make noise if they haven't already?
Well, I spoke with head coach Duke Gartrell just a few nights ago, right? Because I'm actually coaching his two boys, his younger twins. And I think there's a team there, especially come playoff time, that can make some noise I believe they're at the 1A division, right? They're playing very well. They got a kid that can score lights out on anyone. So I'd watch them for the playoffs as we roll through, because they could be very, very dangerous.
What about when you spoke with him, do you think has been their key to success this season?
Funny. Another thing, you got your best player on the team that's the leader, that plays his tail off on defense, right? He plays super hard all the time, and there's nothing better than to have a leader that plays hard, right? There's probably nothing worse to have a leader that doesn't play hard, right? But they have it in the good way right there, and I think the rest of the team feeds off it. He has a few pieces that at the single A division for sure in our area is very successful. We'll see what it's like come PIAA time if they make it that far, when you're playing some of those Pittsburgh schools that are loaded down south.
Yeah, man. Again, the lower classification in basketball is just it's basically Hell's Gate for District 10. But if you have that makeup of a team, it can be really interesting. I'll tell you what, Jonathan, if you want to give one, go ahead and feel free, because I think there are so many to choose from here. But while you wait, and I'll give you a minute to kind of assess your options, I'm going to stay on the boys' side as well. And we talk about star players. We really haven't talked about this team much this season, mainly because, we've been focusing on Region 5 and Region 6 and Region 7. But I'm not sure people are giving Erie First Christian and Avery Collins a lot of credit for what he's been able to do this season. Guy's just a junior. Via Max Preps and Go Erie, he's averaging just about 27 points a game. The guy is so lights out from the field. And what I think has been so great this season for Erie First Christian is it's not just Avery Collins. Last season, it was him that really carried the team. Now you have Aiden Blum, who's coming into the senior year as a forward, who can really attack the rim and be a tough out. I think this Erie First Christian team, who have won 2 straight games, they get Erie Prep tomorrow and then at Eisenhower on Tuesday. Mercyhurst Prep next Friday, by the way. That's a huge game where region implications are concerned. I think you're going to see this Erie First Christian team, so long as Avery Collins is healthy, be really, really tough to beat. Just because of their shooting prowess and how they have really a one both behind the arc and in the paint as well. So keep an eye on the Eagles, 6-0 at home. They've struggled on the road, but they are just 1 game behind Mercyhurst Prep in Region 3.
A lot of those road games were very close in scores.
Yeah. No, and you're right. And they score the basketball too. And to your point, I think when you have a superstar like Collins, who as a freshman really dazzled, he's somebody that you will have to watch out for too. Jonathan, do you have a team, boys or girls side, that you think should be a team to look out for as we move through the middle to ending part of the regular season?
I'm going to the girls side, and it's a team that we haven't really talked much about, but I'm going General McLean. Sitting at 11-6, they have 2 rematches coming up in the last 5 or so games of the season that could be really big for playoff implications. You know, they dropped the earlier match to Harbor Creek, 41-28. They've got them coming up on February 3rd at home, and then they end their season with a rematch against Fairview at home that they've just lost to by about 16 points. So that's a really good chance for them to shake some things up going into playoffs and potentially avenge those 2 losses.
I think the one thing, and maybe, Tom, if you want to comment on this, you can, because we talked about these 3 teams last week, and I posed the question, is this a 3-team race in Region 6, or are we talking just Fairview, Harbor Creek? I don't think General McLean's that far off. The one thing that I would say about the Lancers that I think is a little bit different than Fairview and Harbor Creek is we have seen at times there have been a couple of offensive lulls, 28 points in the loss to Harbor Creek, 28 points in the loss to Fairview, and you haven't seen that, at least to this extent, from the Lady Tigers and the Lady Huskies. I think if GM can put a complete game together, I think they have a really good shot. Their defense has kept them in games, and I think when you look at what they've been able to do in terms of limiting teams' success on offense, whether that's being able to keep hold of the ball, that they do a really good job of keeping possession when they're on the offensive end. But I think Kylie Leisure in the forward spot can make it difficult on opposing offenses to score the basketball. We know Kelsey Berger's a stalwart defender from her time as part of the soccer team as well. Rami Plows is also one of those players who I think is a good 2-way player. I think if GM is able to play a complete game against one of these 2 teams, they have a shot. We just haven't necessarily seen that yet from the Lancers, which is why for Fairview and Harbor Creek right now they've pulled away ahead, Fairview by 2 games and Harbor Creek by 1 of GM.
Yeah, I actually attended the GM Fairview game. I feel bad. I actually left my notes at school, so I don't know names, but I was really impressed with the point guard for GM, number 4,
Sam Duray.
The way she attacks the rim. And I think in that game, they were missing some scoring. Lily, I don't know how many points she had that game, but she really wasn't effective offensively. And if she was, she's a 1,000-point scorer. So if she can get some things going on the offensive end, that's a different game, even though Fairview got him by 16.
And I think, too, there have been games where, and this is not a knock on Sarah Schultz, I think it's because she's a great scorer, but GM's become a little Libby-Op dependent. That's where I think you see the likes of, and it's more so Fairview even than Harbor Creek, because Brooke Przbilski has been so great at scoring in consistent numbers. But Fairview has such a great rotation game that although, yes, we know Bree Height is the focal point in tight in the forward position, and they have a lot of guards that can score the basketball, and they are led by, specific players. I think Paige Garrity's the one that you look at when you look at the guard play. But Fairview just has so many players that can rotate around. GM at times has become a little Libby-Op dependent, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think that sometimes if she's not on, it can cause you to be the difference between a win and a loss. So we'll see. Region 6 will be interesting as well on the girls' side of things. Just a couple weeks left to go in the regular season, too. So a lot of teams to look out for. Big games tomorrow, Meadville, Erie, and, of course, Cathedral Prep-McDowell, round number 2 at the Haggerty Family Event Center. Tom, this is going to be fun. We talk rivalries every time we come on this show. I'm not sure how we're going to have any left But for some crazy reason, we are going to have rivalries left after this week because we still got McDowell Erie to come as well. Great stuff as always, my friend, and always love having you on the show.
Appreciate it, guys.
All right, Tom Koval, former District 10 championship winning coach, and now a insider for us. Thankfully, we're lucky to have him on this show because he does so much great work with checking in on every single team and making sure that he knows the lay of the land as much and certainly more than we do with our full-time jobs and schedules and things of that. He's a busy man too, Tom Koval. But I think, Jonathan, as we roll through the ending part of the season, we talked about this last week, it's shaping up like football. You have a lot of tight region races, which are going to transition into a lot of tight classification races. And I think the one thing that we will learn quickly in the playoffs, if we don't say it at the outset already, is that there are going to be multiple 1 and 2 seeds, in my opinion, really on both boys and girls sides, that won't make the championship game. I just think seeding is that deep in every classification, save for, of course, 6A.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's going to be a matchup based game, which is why these games in the regular season are so important and why these teams jockeying for position, every game matters and every game counts, because to your point, seeding is going to be really important because you could potentially wind up matched up with a lower seed team that isn't where they're supposed to be, really. There can be some 3, 4, 5 seed teams that if you take away a couple games or you make a couple layups, those are 1 or 2 seed teams that you're matching up with, where it's not a traditional 4 seed or not a traditional 5 seed game. It's not a traditional, get up early, get a big lead and then rest your starters for the next round. You're going to have to play those games. So you see a lot of these teams and they're kind of jockeying for position to get in the best spot they possibly can during playoffs, because a 2 seed or a 3 seed, even if you're hosting, you could have a matchup on your hands in that first round.
Yeah, and we're only a few weeks away, like we said, from playoffs. February is always a crazy month for high school basketball, and then you transition to the March, which if it's anything like last year, we're going to see 6 seeds, a la Iroquois winning championships and close games. And maybe, cross your fingers, we'd love to see on the girls' side 2 multiple Western finals between District 10 teams. That would be a lot of fun. That's down the road. We'll see. Jonathan will be watching from sunny South Carolina, I'm sure. We'll get you a subscription to the NFHS network or Huddle or whatever it takes. Hey, before we get into our final subject matter tonight, our show, of course, as always, is brought to you by Revich Investments, keeping financial guidance simple. 814-734-3433 is the number to call. If you want to go to their website, they're available 24/7 at www.revichinvestments.com. Before we go, I want to touch on the Erie Otters. And, of course, if you haven't heard the news, the big news coming out of the Erie Insurance Arena is that Stan Butler is now the former head coach of the Otters. He was fired earlier this week after an 11-day internal review. This article from Erie News Now, Butler being relieved of his duties as head coach after that review. General Manager Dave Brown saying, we wanted to make sure we did the right thing, that we were fair to all parties involved. Now, of course, there's been speculation as to what incident or incidents occurred that led to Butler's firing, but there's been no direct communication with that, so we're not going to hypothesize on what it was. Biggest thing I wanted to ask you, Jonathan, because I haven't gotten a chance to do an episode with Ryan Zapolsky in a while, and we're going to bring back Hockey Talk Tuesday soon, but I wanted to just touch on, from your perspective, Jonathan, as somebody who has been in a locker room and I'm sure has been through adverse situations, you look at the players now and you think, middle of the season and this happens. Whatever happens, there's got to be a reset button that gets hit, but you're talking about to teenagers and young 20-something-year-old teams. What's the key as a player to trying to move past something like this to get back on track? What if you're in that locker room for the Otters, what is the key to making sure that you get back on track, knowing that you've got a playoff run in your grasp and in your sight and a huge game tomorrow night against your rival in London?
2 things. 1, control what you can control. As a player for that organization, it's not your job to control anything that goes on in the front office. You have no control over who gets hired, who gets fired, who's there from day to day. Your job is to make sure that you are well prepared to go out and play the best game that you can play every time you touch the ice. So for 1, it's just control what you can control. focus on the controllables and just go out there and play hockey the way that you know how to play hockey. For 2 is lean on your guys. This is one of those situations where you're going to need your team to kind of rally together. You're going to need guys to kind of pick one another up, and you're going to need guys to kind of bond a little bit, show some camaraderie and just play for the guys that are to your left and to your right and that you go to war with on a daily basis, because you guys are the ones on the ice actually making it happen, and you guys are the ones actually playing. So play for each other, lean on each other, and control what you control, and everything else above you, let it be above you.
Yeah, and again, as you look through the rest of the season, there's a lot in front of this team for the Otters. You look, the Stan Butler firing was earlier in the week. Erie then goes on the road. Yesterday evening, they beat Owen Sound in overtime. That's a huge win in division where that's concerned. So, you look at this schedule now for the Otters. A lot of road games coming up. London on the road, Sarnia on the road on Friday and Saturday, and then you have to go back to play on the road next Friday after a home game on Tuesday, which will be their education days. And I think, too, for Erie, the one thing that you could, I think, say, and I would say that this is probably – there's no good time for a coach to get fired. There's no good time for a review like this to take place, whatever happened. But I think when you look at this Otters team and you look at the core that they have, whether it's Kerry Taranson, their captain, whether it's Matthew Schaefer, who's now for the OHL an experienced veteran, Malcolm Spence, the list goes on of players that have been through difficult times before. And I think if you're the Otters, you're sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, well, like to your point, Jonathan, all you can do is move on. All you can do is do your best to try to win games in front of you. And you're sitting in third of your division. You're probably not going to catch the top 2 of London and Kitchener, but you're in a spot where you're going to be at worst probably 4th in your conference. And so I think for the Otters, the key now is A, take it one game at a time, but B, understand that the experience that you've gotten from the last couple of years, whatever adversity you have faced, now you have a chance to use that as food and use it as motivation to your advantage moving forward. Right now, Ken Peroff, Wes Wolf acting as co-coaches. Dave Brown was not direct as to whether or not the Otters would hire a new coach in season. He said if it ends up, I believe it was something along the lines of, and I don't want to misquote him, but essentially if a decision like that is made, then we'll reassess. So the Otters sitting right now 50 points on the season, 3rd in their division, and now minus a head coach, 2 co-coaches in Wes Wolf and Ken Peroff. And again, we'll keep you up to date on what happens at the Erie Insurance Arena when we learn more. Also want to mention as well, and nothing official yet, but stay tuned because we might be showing you the inside of the Erie Insurance Arena on a podcast coming up soon. So, Jonathan, I know.
You want to start doing all the fun stuff after I leave, man.
No, wait a minute. I don't see, this is when, if I'm you, I'm just going to take a picture of yourself on the beach somewhere and send it to us whenever we're doing these live podcasts somewhere.
There you
I
go.
don't want to hear a thing about it. We still have snow on the ground, and it's 15 degrees with 45-mile-an-hour winds.
Man, I am going to be about an hour and 15 minutes away from Myrtle Beach, so that will be nice.
By the way, your opinion on Myrtle Beach. I've been there once. I liked it. There are people who say it's too touristy and things like that. Your opinion on that?
As a native from South Carolina, it's overrated.
Okay.
You go once in a while, but I get the too touristy vibe. You don't meet a lot of people from South Carolina in Myrtle Beach. A lot of the times when you go to Myrtle Beach, you meet people from Pennsylvania, from Ohio, from Rhode Island, from like that New England area. You rarely ever meet South Carolinians in Myrtle Beach. It's always a lot of transplants. So
I will say the one memory I have of South Carolina, Myrtle Beach, there were a lot of good ones, but I don't know if they still have them. But if there's anyone from the Myrtle Beach area that's watching our podcast, and I don't know why you would be, maybe you're one of Jonathan's faithful fans and you're watching from the area, please tell the director of parking services that meters should not be allowed to just keep your bills if you insert too much into a parking meter. So they had these, and I vividly remember this, my wife, then girlfriend at the time, we drive down to the boardwalk, we park in one of those metered parking spaces, and I put a 20 or whatever in the parking meter expecting to get like $10 back in change. No, it took my change. I'm still short $10 from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Your first
So
your first mistake was paying the meter to begin with, and then your second mistake was not having exact change.
see, I don't know the local behind the scenes, key things to things to make your life easier in Myrtle Beach. I don't have that handbook next to me.
Hey man, don't worry. When I get down there, I'll make sure I draft some stuff out and send it back up to you for
All
your
right.
visit.
Well, maybe we'll have to make one of our special episodes in South Carolina at some point. We'll see.
For sure.
You will see. Maybe we can do it during one of your games.
Hey,
well, just send us your schedule and we'll make it happen.
Oh, yeah.
All right. That's it for us tonight. We got a show coming up tomorrow night, though, 7 o'clock. We're talking NFL, Bills, of course, where they go from here. Are the Steelers and Browns that close to contending? And we are going to reveal our picks for Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Coach of the Year, and the MVP. So we're giving out the NFL honors before the NFL honors actually happen because, we like to talk about things that are hypotheticals on this show sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. All right, we'll see you all tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. Thanks again for being a part of our show. We love you all. We love you being a part of our broadcast, and thanks again for supporting the Gem City Sports Podcast Network. Take it easy, everybody.